Good morning, everyone. I'm very pleased to be joining you this morning from the territory of the signatories to Treaty 7, and I'd also like to recognize the Métis people of Alberta who share a very deep connection with our land. I'm so pleased to be joined by Phil Rosenberg with the Canadian Condo Owners Forum Society of Alberta and Hadrian D'Souza, board member for One Century Park Condo Corporation, and also by our MLA for Calgary, McCall, Bular, Irfan Sabir. We're here today because Albertans are paying higher costs for everything from gas to groceries. Inflation is soaring, and Albertans are seeing the highest spike in the cost of living in almost 40 years. Every single dollar counts as a result. Now, right now, families are feeling the pressure on the household budget every time they open their mail and every time they open their power bill. The regulated price for electricity in July is currently over 14 cents per kilowatt hour, approaching the all-time high that we saw in February when prices hit 16 cents per kilowatt hour. And for comparison or context's sake, this is more than double the price that we had put the cap on when we were in government up to 2019. So the fact is now that the UCP has removed that power cap, that power price cap, the price has almost doubled, and the protection is gone, and the pressure on Alberta families is urgent. Now, the UCP government promised Albertans that they would, as a result of this pressure, receive a rebate. And they made that promise back in February. And now, 6 months later, we're hearing that the first $50 installment on that promise may arrive in people's pockets in August. But the fact is, it's not enough. It's not on time. But for many, it is welcome because they're desperate and frankly, they need any help they can get. But more recently, we've learned that once again, this rebate plan that Albertans have been waiting for since February is not working as advertised. We now know that not every Albertan who owns property and pays for power will actually get a rebate. The rebate program is structured so that sub-metered units just aren't eligible. Only the main site to the distribution system and which receives a bill from a regulated utility provider is actually eligible to receive the rebate. And that only happens if it consumes less than 250 megawatt hours per year. So what does that mean? Well, here's the thing. It means that if 200 people share the same meter, like they do in many condo buildings across this province, no one in that building gets a rebate. Now, we've heard this issue is a problem in many communities across this province, especially where many of these single-meter condos were constructed in the 70s and 80s. In my own riding in Edmonton, just east of the U of A, there are blocks upon blocks of walk-up apartment buildings that were built in the 60s and 70s that were converted to condos in the 2000s. And as Phil knows very well, there are similar condos like that in his community. For instance, Rio Vista condominiums in his neck of the woods in Lethbridge consists of 124 units that all share 1 meter. So instead of those folks receiving the expected rebate of over $6,200 per month on their joint utility bill, they will get zero. This is an age 55 plus building where the average age is over 80. Let that sink in. Those are the folks that the UCP designed a plan that won't get help as a result of the way the UCP designed the plan. Albertans who are, by and large, seniors on fixed incomes, single income workers, or young families won't get the rebate, even as they are called upon to pay the much higher power prices. These are Albertans who pay taxes and pay for electricity and, quite frankly, expect the government to keep the word that they delivered last February. This is a question of fundamental fairness. Every single Albertan is feeling the pressure of high power bills, and yet the way the UCP designed this rebate is going to exclude potentially tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of people, including many who I would say actually need the help the most. Now, our party has spoken to dozens of condo corporations waiting for answers from Associate Minister Dale Nally, including the northern and southern chapters of the nonpartisan Canadian Condominiums Institute. Many of them have written to the minister seeking answers, and if he picks up the phone and actually calls them, well, he'll also hear some proposed solutions from those folks. And here's what they are suggesting, and what we agree with. The government of Alberta should commit to allowing condo boards to apply directly for the rebate of their buildings based on the number of occupied units and make that application to the government. A simple process that would make that the full rebate for all owners is taken off of people's condos fees. The government should also lift their cap on residential-only buildings, which is also unfair. Why should a 20-unit building get a rebate, but not a 100-unit building? It makes no sense when these are the same taxpayers. Most importantly, the government should act because it is, quite frankly, the right thing to do. We can't create a case where some Albertans get help and others do not, simply because they chose to buy a condo and not a house. The government took a very long time to get this program figured out, heaven knows, because right now, no one's actually received a single cent of it. Yet they have still failed to do the work of making sure it works for all Albertans. These claims that the rebate method is the most efficient are complete nonsense if people aren't receiving it. Figure it out. Get it done. This is our message to this UCP government. Alberta's NDP will continue to stand up and fight for fairness and fight for a real affordability plan that supports all Albertans who need it, not just a small few number. I will now pass the mic to Phil to share his perspective on behalf of the Condo Owners Forum Society.
Thank you, Rachel. My name is Phil Rosenzweig. I'm on the board of directors of the Condominium Society of Alberta. We advocate for condo owners across the province. We network and we educate fellow owners. The Condo Owners Forum wrote to Associate Minister Nally on July 11th, suggesting some inequities in the way that the energy affordability programs were to be rolled out. While we applaud this program of giving back to hardworking Albertans, trying to keep their heads above water and making ends meet during these times of economic uncertainty and inflation, and we also understand that there's a cost to these programs, and therefore some method of qualifying recipients of this program may be necessary, we feel that the economic benefits may have inadvertently missed out many of the people for whom the rebates were intended to help, due to the way that the program was designed. The estimated million-plus condominium owners in the province are taxpayers and owners of approximately 1/4 of the housing stock in the province. Condominiums are also the fastest growing segment of new home builds in the province. We believe the government's affordability program has created two classes of condo owners. Many of the condominiums built in the last 20 years have been built so homeowners are individually billed for their utilities. However, many older apartment style and condominiums or apartment conversions have single meter structures for each of their utilities they receive unless they went the expensive process of submetering. Condominiums exceeding the annual consumption caps are ineligible to receive the rebate. Individually, however, the unit owners themselves do not consume anywhere close to that threshold. They consume exactly or even less than what a single-family homeowner does. Although the condominium corporation pays one monthly bill for each of the utilities that are provided for these buildings, The funds to pay these utilities are paid monthly in the contributions that each condominium owner gives to their condominium corporation. As an example, Rachel already mentioned Rio Vista condominiums in Lethbridge. There are at least 4 other major buildings in Lethbridge consisting of the same demographics, mainly seniors on fixed incomes, representing over 1,000 people. And that's just 4 buildings in Lethbridge. We certainly can understand that the complexities of the administration of this program and we understand the enormity of the program expense. We realize also that the government is charged with trying to make this program available to as many Albertans as possible and as cost effectively as possible. But did this happen? As such, we recommended a compromise that by adding additional step that is already available to consumers that would allow all condominium owners to be treated the same. The Energy Affordability website shows that information that anyone who believes they are eligible for the rebate but does not see it on their July bill should contact the utility consumer advocate. We suggest that condominiums with single bulk metering also contact the utility consumer advocate and get certified, as Rachel had mentioned. Once certified, the utilities would be expected to honor the rebates on the number of units in the complex. We realize this is a lot to ask, but we would be failing hundreds of thousands of Albertan homeowners that will fall through the cracks of this generous program if some accommodation is not made for them. What the government has done has created 2 types of condominium homeowner. One class of these homeowners live in smaller, newer condominiums built within the last 20 years and are eligible. The second class of condominium homeowner live in larger, often older condominiums where, through no fault of their own, despite being homeowners paying taxes and paying their portion of utilities through their monthly contributions to their condominium, they're considered ineligible. These 2 classes of condominium owners should be treated the same. We thank you for the opportunity to state our case and encourage the government to consider our proposals, redraft the legislation, and include the thousands of Albertans that they've currently left out.
So thank you, Phil, and I'd like now to invite Hadrian to provide some remarks about what he's hearing from families in his buildings in Ermineskin.
Thank you, Rachel. As mentioned, my name is Hadrian D'Souza, and I am a board member of the One Century Park Condo Corp, representing condominium owners in 2 buildings in Ermineskin, Edmonton. I'm here today because for the past couple of years, the cost of living has increased for Albertans, and today, inflation is at an all-time high. As a board member, these rising costs also mean that unfortunately, owners are paying higher condo fees. The biggest driver of these higher condo fees are our utility costs. Our utilities make up 41% of our fees. And as everyone knows, electricity prices have been climbing higher and higher. They are too high right now, and Albertans need help. Our owners include seniors on fixed income and the disabled. So the news that the government was providing a rebate on electricity was good news. However, that news was short-lived. Recently, we have learned that because our buildings have a single utility meter, our owners are not eligible for the rebate. These are 184 owners and families in our buildings. That rebate represents approximately $10,000 per month in rebates that should be coming off our fees. Instead, those that were promised this help simply will not get it. I and our entire board and all of our owners believe that this is wrong and fundamentally unfair. These are Albertans who pay taxes and who pay for electricity through their fees. They deserve to be treated the same. We are all homeowners. Owning a condo shouldn't separate us from other homeowners who pay their power directly. I have spoken to many owners who feel let down because there's no reason to leave us out. So we are here today to ask the government to listen, to look at how this is being rolled out, and to make changes. If this is an oversight, it must be fixed. Let's change this and include everyone who needs it. Thank you, Rachel, for having me here today.
Thank you so much, Hadrian, and also Phil, and also Irfan for being here. And we are certainly happy to take any questions you may have.
Thanks, folks. I think we'll start with questions on the ground. Go to CBC. No, go ahead.
Mike Sonington, CBC. How did we get here, Rachel? How is it that this program, it seems like it wasn't fully planned?
Well, I mean, I think honestly, listen, this is a UCP government that has had to be dragged to the table on this issue from day one. We started raising concerns about the spiking cost of electricity in the fall. And they finally announced what I would argue was a pretty paltry program, $50 per month for 3 months. And then they've been promising us that we would see it, month after month after month, and we still haven't seen it. The latest, the latest piece of information is that we'll see it in August. But obviously, not only were they dragging their feet in the decision and in the administration of the decision, they've also been very sloppy in the design of this solution, and we hear from the minister's office, well, this was the most efficient thing. In my view, efficiency is not applicable if part of that efficiency is secured by excluding tens of thousands and maybe hundreds of thousands of Albertans who need this rebate perhaps the most. So this is a fundamentally unfair program, and the UCP should be showing up to work, asking the hard questions of the public officials, rolling up their sleeves, and designing a program that will actually support all Albertans. It's a fundamental principle of fairness. It's a fundamental principle of doing the hard work and being a good representative. And it's a fundamental principle of making sure that you actually have Albertans' backs when you promise them that that's what you're going to do.
Hi, Global News. The mayors of Calgary and surrounding communities are now raising concerns over the situation in Airdrie. Can we get your thoughts of this coming together of the mayors and what can be done to help urgent care in Airdrie?
Well, I've been very concerned since hearing, in particular, I mean, the stories with respect to what's happening in Airdrie and the fact that urgent care is being shut down there. And my heart goes out to those families in Airdrie who themselves or who live with folks who regularly might need urgent care, as well as all people in that community who want to know that they have access to urgent care, as they should in a city that size. We know that there's been a long-standing issue there around their desire for more services, but what we're seeing right now is that the assumption that existed before, that they were relatively close to several different Calgary hospitals, no longer applies, because for the last several months we've been hearing how their access to ambulance service is among the worst in the province, and that their ambulances are being pulled into Calgary because of the UCP reorganization of ambulance services, and so people in the surrounding areas can't get access to ambulance services. And so the fact that they happen to be reasonably close to hospitals in Calgary doesn't matter if they can't get an ambulance. And so this is just not an acceptable outcome. And the UCP, again, has to get back to work, roll up its sleeves, and find a way to help the people of Airdrie have access to urgent care over the weekend, in the evenings, as anybody else in a city that size, in a province like Alberta, would expect to have.
Okay, I just have another topic. Can I get your reaction on Vancouver City Council voting to spend $700,000 on a lawsuit against big oil and gas companies for climate change related costs?
Well, I have to say I haven't heard about that, so I don't know the details of that lawsuit. But what I will say is that they're not likely to be super successful, given that they themselves are customers. And so what little I know of the law is that you need to come to these kinds of things with clean hands, and folks who rely on oil and gas, which is pretty much everyone across this country, are not necessarily in a position to do that kind of thing. We need, however, as Albertans, as people who support our oil and gas industry, to continue to do the hard work of ensuring that we develop sustainable, low carbon oil and gas resources, and that we ensure that we do so with respect for the environment and the footprint that we leave, and understanding that we have an obligation to reduce our emissions. And we're all part of that. And we're going to continue to work on that part of the project, ensuring that we reduce those emissions, and we work with our leaders in the industry to be the lowest emission producing provider of oil and gas resources in the world.
Phil. Phil, could I speak to you? Phil?
Pardon me?
Phil?
Yeah, you bet.
Hi, Phil. Listen, I just want, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. So your condominium complex pays the electrical bill, and the bill has a name on it. And now that name will not get a rebate either, is that correct?
Most larger buildings won't qualify because they use the majority over the cap on the
They're over the
limits.
250.
And pretty well all condominium corporations pay their own bills and will have the name of the corporation on the utility.
And the government will not rebate that name either. So there's no chance of those people getting money. Now, you did mention that the percentage of paid on that bill to that corporation or the holding account of it. Then would your belief be that it is divided, just simply divided amongst simple math, divided amongst the residents?
What it would do, it would lower the payments that the condominium corporation pays on behalf of the owners. So the next year we will be able to budget that as a rebate, and they'll have to pay less in their condominium fees.
That's how you would imagine it.
That's the way I see it.
Do you believe the government didn't go this way because they just go, there's no way? Well, why do you think the government made this choice to not support and to have the 250 cap?
I can't speak for the government. I know the government wanted to find a quick way to be able to support as many Albertans as possible, but they didn't do their homework. And they certainly did not do their homework how it affects condominium owners.
When you found out you weren't going to get a rebate, were you angry?
The Condo Owners Forum group started pestering first through Minister Glubish in April. We knew there were going to be problems, and we were advised to talk to somebody from the Energy Department.
And so here we are today. How do you feel?
Unheard.
What do you want to happen?
The whole system of rebates and how this program is rolled out needs to be reimagined so that we aren't creating two different classes of condominium owner who are taxpayers.
Thank you, Phil. Adrian, just one question for you.
Yes, sir.
Are you like Phil, understood that in April you perceived some problems?
Yeah, we heard about this rebate program and we spoke to our condo manager and we asked him to investigate how we can get a rebate. Our condo fees went up 5% to budget, and we had to make cuts in other areas to manage our condo fees so that it's not an extravagant increase. And our condo manager came back and said, sorry, you're out of luck. There's no space for you. There's no place you can even apply. And we said, that doesn't make sense. So let's investigate. And we wrote to our MLA, and yeah, they confirmed that this is the situation that we were forgotten about.
And what did your MLA say when you said, well, we don't believe this to be fair?
Our MLA, who's NDP, asked us to, reach out to Rachel and then have this press conference and bring it up to the government as an oversight, right? This is an oversight for the people of Alberta and for condo owners. And so we want to bring this issue up so that it can be fixed and so people can get their rebates.
When you talk to the residents in that building, are they outraged? Are they accepting? What is the spectrum of emotion?
I think a lot of condo owners in our buildings are upset because the condo fees have been increasing, and a lot of that, like I said, 41% is our utilities, and so they're upset and they're looking for ways to reduce it, and we are trying. We do not want to end up in a situation where we're cutting our reserve fund or having to do special assessments. Those tend to be more difficult for the owners. So we try to cut in places we can cut, like window washing, for example. But high inflation and the high fees everywhere, we see it all across. So the rebate was welcome until we found out we couldn't get it.
What do you want the government to do? What would you like to hear from the government today?
I would like them to open up perhaps an application process where we can apply through our condo manager, and we can provide all the documents necessary to prove that we're not trying to game the system. We're just trying to help the people who are owners and taxpayers.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
We'll now go to the Zoom. First question comes from Shilan Skulsey. Shilan, should be able to go ahead.
Is for Rachel Notley, and I apologize, it is off topic from today's announcements. I'm just wanting to talk a little bit about gas tax or gas savings at the pump. I just heard from one gas analyst who suggests the prices at the pump in Alberta are at least 20 cents higher than they ought to be, and attributes that spike to retailers taking fat margins and not passing along any of the savings that they've seen in recent weeks in the drop of price of oil to consumers. Yet when we asked the Premier about this week, he insists that the province has done its part by pausing the gas tax. Do you agree?
No, I don't. I believe that the province has done half of its part by pausing the gas tax. And let me be clear, we called on them to consider pausing the gas tax as one of the solutions back in the spring before they did it. So we supported them when they did it. But our call also included a different component, and that was that we did regular audits and that we paired the pausing of the gas tax with a clear statutory obligation that the full savings had to be passed on to the consumer, and then we regularly audited in order to ensure that was happening. And instead what we've seen is that the government's washed its hands of this, as exactly as the Premier has said, perhaps because they're too distracted by their own internal drama. But the outcome of that is that Albertans are being left behind. And when they go to fill up their gas tanks, they're finding that they're not getting the benefit of the paused gas tax. So the government needs to show up to work, roll up its sleeves, do the work to make sure that the policies that they've brought into place actually impact Albertans the way they were intended to.
You have a follow-up, Shilan?
Yeah, just a follow-up. In terms of kind of that guarantee that you'd like to see that those savings are actually being passed on, I guess what does that look like when you say you want the government to show up to work, roll up its sleeve? What kind of guarantee would you like to see to ensure that week after week that money is actually going to Albertans?
Well, again, as I say, I think that if you were to create a statutory obligation for that, if there were to be penalties associated with not passing it on, and if there were to be a regular system of spot audits to ensure that was tracked, then I think that those are tactics and strategies that could be used to protect Albertans and to make sure that they have more money in their pocket at the end of the month.
Thanks, Shilan. Next question comes from the phone lines. Caller, when you hear your line is unmuted, you can introduce yourself and ask your question.
Hi, it's Ken McGilbert at Global Calgary. I have a follow-up about the Airdrie Urgent Care Facility. It's broader than that. We also got a viewer complaining that in Bassano, which 8-10 years ago they had 2 doctors, now they have no longer have their emergency department is closed from 5 p.m. to 8 a.m. Monday to Thursday. So it seems, and they say it's because of a lack of doctors. So it seems to me, kind of on the surface, that the problems in Airdrie, the problem in Bassano, and potentially other communities is because of a lack of doctors. What needs to be done to fix that situation? How do we attract more doctors? How do we train more doctors? But how do we get more doctors to be willing to come to Alberta or set up shop in Alberta?
Well, you know, if I could step back a little bit, the fact of the matter is that the number of emergency rooms that are being temporarily closed across this province has gone up exponentially. It is a massive change from the way it was before. I'm not going to say it never happened before, but we're looking at exponential growth, and by that I mean, far too many, dozens and dozens of communities across Alberta at any given time that don't have access to emergency room care. And this problem has been growing for at least the last 12 to 18 months, and for the longest time the UCP tried to pretend it was business as usual. There are a whole range of reasons for why it's happening. Some of it's seasonal, but it also goes to exactly the kinds of issues that you're identifying. It goes to the availability of doctors, but also the availability of nurses, the availability of other frontline healthcare professionals, a whole range of whom need to be there in order for that emergency room to be open. And so we have a shortage in healthcare professionals across the board. Meanwhile, we have a UCP government that, a couple months before the pandemic, threatened to fire a bunch of nurses, threatened to fire thousands of other healthcare professionals, bargained by demanding that they take wage cuts, ripped up the doctor's contract, and even now are still only piece by piece starting to fix the mess that they've created. And as you identify, the doctor's deal remains unresolved. And so as we try to attract doctors to Alberta, and we have to compete with them across the country, what doctors around the country and around the world understand is that Alberta doesn't have a deal with their doctors, that they broke their word with their doctors, that they ripped up their contract with their doctors, and that they haven't fixed the problem since. So this growth in this emergency failure to provide care for Albertans is directly the responsibility of this UCP government and their failure to treat healthcare professionals, including doctors, with the respect that they deserve.
Follow-up?
No, all good. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question also comes from the phone line. Caller, when you hear your line is unmuted, you can introduce yourself and ask your question.
Hi, this is Kayla Brooke from CTV News Calgary. This question is for Rachel Notley. I'm just curious, are we seeing, as far as healthcare, a larger problem in, say, rural settings versus in city centers? Or is this just an overall broad, short-staffed, jammed emergency rooms type of situation? And if so, what would you do differently?
Well, I think, listen, healthcare is very complicated. It's our access to public health care that is there for our families and our loved ones when we need it is a fundamentally important thing, probably the most important thing that a provincial government can ever do. It's complicated. It requires a lot of work all the time. There are a number of ways in which this UCP government's attack on our public health care system, which began almost as soon as they got elected, have picked away and poked away and undermined the quality of health care that Alberta families can expect to receive in communities all across this province. So what might have been on the issue of emergency rooms, something that happened very rarely in small rural communities over the summer, a few years ago, is now affecting healthcare across the province in small rural communities for unacceptably long periods of time, up to and including major cities where whole hospitals have to close their emergency surgery sections, and ambulances, the ones that we know are completely overworked and also being brutally let down by this government, can't even take their patients to those major city hospitals anymore when an emergency occurs. So it's now expanded and spread like a contagion across our province in a way that is tearing at the fundamental framework of our healthcare system. And I heard the Premier a couple days ago, or maybe last week, try to claim that this is a problem all across the country. let me be clear. It is worse here than it is anywhere else in the country. We started from a better place. We are now falling farther behind the rest of the country because only in Alberta have we had to watch a government engage in a sustained attack on our public health care system from multiple fronts for 3 years in the middle of a generational pandemic. Only this UCP government would maintain that public policy approach, and it has to be stopped immediately.
Follow-up, Kayla?
Nope, that's fine. Thanks so much.
Okay, I'm just going to check with folks here if they're good. And with that, we will conclude today's news conference. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
So much for watching, and to learn more, check out albertasfuture.ca.